In this section, we're going to look at the different types of participants shaping Bitcoin's future and what motivates them. It's impossible to map out every participant and every conflicting incentive in full detail. There are also invisible forces that don't directly participate in the Bitcoin network, but still influence it in indirect ways. That said, by getting familiar with some of the more straightforward incentive conflicts between participants, we can build a much deeper understanding of Bitcoin.
Bitcoin evolves through a continuous series of updates, and since there's no central authority running things, those decisions get made through something that works a bit like a complicated vote. So if you want to get a real sense of where Bitcoin is headed, it's really important to understand who's involved, what they want, and how they participate.
We've highlighted three major groups of people connected to the ecosystem. Within the Bitcoin community, there are many different communities with their own characteristics, such as the development community, node runners, and Bitcoin holders. Many people belong to more than one of these groups. There are many different kinds of Bitcoin companies as well. Some companies develop products while also contributing to the public protocol. Others, such as companies operating Bitcoin ETFs, treat Bitcoin primarily as a financial asset and have little connection to protocol development. It's a very diverse landscape. Governments and regulators create the laws that form the regulatory framework. They do not directly participate in the Bitcoin network, but influence it indirectly. Their relationship with Bitcoin varies significantly by country. Some are actively promoting it as an industry, while others have put in place rules that come close to outright bans.
So those are the three big groups shaping Bitcoin's future, but within each one, there's a lot of variety. In the community alone, you've got developers, node runners, and plenty of others. On the corporate side, there are mining companies, financial institutions, and indirectly involved players such as Bitcoin-focused venture capital firms. It really is a wide mix of people with very different positions.
The Bitcoin community and Bitcoin companies might seem naturally aligned, but their interests don't always line up. Companies are driven by profit. The Bitcoin community, on the other hand, values decentralization, which means it tends to push back against any single company becoming too dominant. Generally speaking, companies make money not from the public protocol itself, but from the products they build on top of it. That said, when a dominant product starts to influence how the protocol develops, that's not great for the ecosystem as a whole. On top of that, both companies and community groups come with their own visions for what Bitcoin should be. For example, someone who does not place much importance on Bitcoin as an asset and instead focuses on its use as a currency may see things very differently. They may find themselves at odds with ETF operators or companies focused on holding Bitcoin as an asset, especially if those players push hard for strict anti-money laundering measures.
Even within the Bitcoin community, different groups can have very different cultures and values. The development community tends to have significant influence. Bitcoin's protocol improvements and upgrade proposals come out of this space. In a sense, it's where the future direction of Bitcoin gets talked through and decided. That said, it's open to anyone. Anyone can join, speak up, and put forward a proposal. A lot of startups have come out of these communities too, and some companies still have strong ties to that community culture even as they've grown. But as we touched on earlier, there are real tensions too. Mining companies are players inside the Bitcoin network, while financial institutions selling ETFs operate on the outside, running businesses that don't directly touch the network itself. Bitcoin has always been built around individual autonomy, but for it to spread in the real world, corporate activity plays an important role too.
Governments and regulators aren't direct participants in the Bitcoin network, but through industry legislation, they set the rules that Bitcoin companies are required to follow. For example, if you try to send Bitcoin from an exchange to someone else, you'll typically face strict KYC, know your customer, identity verification requirements. On the other hand, if an individual running their own full node sends Bitcoin directly to another individual, this can currently be done without KYC in most countries. That's because government control is primarily exercised through business regulations. Different governments take very different stances on Bitcoin. Some have adopted a highly restrictive approach, bordering on prohibition. Others are actively shaping regulation to help the industry grow.
Regulation is a big and complicated topic, so we won't go too deep into it in this series. Regulators aren't players inside the Bitcoin network, but lately they've had a huge impact on businesses in this space, sometimes making things harder, sometimes opening doors. In the US, for instance, when regulators approved Bitcoin ETFs, it opened the way for large institutions to gain indirect exposure to Bitcoin. And as of 2026, the fact that the US government is actively discussing holding Bitcoin as a reserve asset has itself become major news.
As we mentioned, regulation is currently applied primarily through business law, targeting companies and service providers rather than individual users. Bitcoin has been developed with self-sovereignty at its core, the idea that individuals should have full control over their own money. Governments and regulators, in the interest of social stability, impose things like anti-money laundering requirements. At the same time, the right to hold Bitcoin in a non-custodial wallet and freely send it to others touches on fundamental freedoms, freedom of expression, and individual property rights. These two interests, institutional oversight and individual rights, are in direct tension, and there's currently no clear legal framework that resolves them. For now, regulation is being handled primarily through business law, applied to service providers.
As we covered in Part 3, self-sovereignty is one of Bitcoin's most important qualities. Some people call it free money in the sense of financial freedom. I personally love this philosophy, so of course I run my own full node and manage and send my Bitcoin freely. That said, I also keep some Bitcoin on an exchange, and because exchanges are subject to strict regulations, I've gone through identity verification there. In this way, many different players are involved, and each of them has a real impact on everyday Bitcoin life.
We can also look at the ecosystem from a different angle. Here, we've broken things down into three groups within the Bitcoin network itself: individuals running full nodes and participating in consensus, companies engaged in mining, and developers. Of course, some people fall into more than one of these categories. Bitcoin users are happy when transaction fees are low. Mining companies, on the other hand, prefer higher fees, since that's part of their revenue. That's a direct conflict of interest right there. Mining companies tend to want more concentrated power in order to maximize profits. Developers, meanwhile, keep working to push the network in the opposite direction by continuing development aimed at increasing decentralization. Many Bitcoin users want to see development that supports price appreciation. Developers, on the other hand, tend to move carefully and deliberately, prioritizing decentralization and security, even if that means slower progress or less convenience in the short term.
Here we looked at the participants from a different angle, and you can see there are all kinds of competing incentives at play.
We started by dividing things into three broad groups. Within each, there's a wide range of people with different backgrounds and motivations, and many belong to more than one group. Let's take a closer look at who's actually in each one. Within the Bitcoin community, the development community focuses on the protocol itself. Since improvement proposals for Bitcoin often come from here, it carries a lot of influence. Then there are individuals who run full nodes without doing development work. And while most mining is done by companies, there's a growing number of individuals who mine on their own as well. There are also people who hold Bitcoin and use it for transactions. On the corporate side, mining companies, as mentioned, are one of the key players. They're often among the first to decide whether to accept or reject a proposed protocol upgrade, which gives them significant leverage. There are also many companies building second-layer protocols and applications on top of Bitcoin. Some even hire Bitcoin core developers and allow them to contribute freely. And then there are the financial institutions running ETFs, cryptocurrency exchanges, and firms investing in mining companies. As for governments and regulators, they exist in every country. The U.S. has been particularly prominent in the news recently as it moves toward promoting Bitcoin as part of its industrial and financial strategy. International financial organizations like the IMF and BIS have also been vocal about crypto broadly. On the anti-money laundering front in particular, an organization called FATF holds significant sway.
The Bitcoin network brings together a wide range of participants, all with different incentives, and somehow, out of all those competing interests, a unique balance is maintained. Transactions keep flowing, and the system keeps improving through mechanisms that resemble a kind of majority decision. Does that give you a clearer picture of how it all fits together?